So welcome to the Node.js package maintenance team meeting for May 9th, 2024. We'll follow our standard approach of looking at the items that were tagged in the agenda. Before we do that, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the agenda issues. If people could add themselves to the minutes, that would be great. I'm just going to paste that in the chat here. No, that's not it. Where's the chat? Chat. Okay. Open, don't forget. Okay, the first one, globally installing NPM should not be a recommended way for Mac and Linux. I don't think there's been any specific discussion on that, but I think we can use that as an intro to discuss the work that Jeffrey has been working on over the last little while. I see, Wes, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just a stepping stone. I think the first thing is sort of like directly attacking this problem, right? Because we so his proposal there is to update the website to just better guide folks on this. So I do think that proposal is with the goal to solve like this kind of specifically. Right? I mean, it includes Node as well, but that's sort of just an extension of this problem.
Yeah. I mean, this was a very specific point about globally installing NPM, but anyway, I think it doesn't matter. It's a good time to discuss where we're at on that particular one. He'd opened this issue, which I'll paste in the Node.js. We are the package maintenance repo. I'll paste the link in the issue, which was he'd opened this under version management. And this particular one was open, had reviews, and landed in terms of proposals or reviews that review the download page. And so my kind of like, I'll give a little bit of background in terms of what I think the next step is. Like, this landed in the package maintenance repo, which I think is great. The key thing for me is that, this first line is like, our view is that the optimal way to install Node.js and Bootstrap components like a package manager through one of or more external tools. And so I tagged it. I created an issue in the TSC repo because this has already landed, couldn't tag the PR, and pointed to this to have basically put it on the TSC agenda so that we make sure that we've got consensus more broadly that yes, that is we have agreement on that or not, and we have to kick off the discussion. If we do have agreement, then we can say, well, what does that mean for things like whether core pack is enabled by default or not, and like, because that seems to me the key bit. And then in here, it's a very concrete example. In the rest of it is, well, what's one step we can take in that direction, which is to then say, let's update the website to tell you how to follow that approach using what's available today. Hopefully in tomorrow and next year, there'll be even better answers, but this is the way you could implement that view today, right? So that's
Yeah, and
kind
I
of
think this is
my
an
2 cents.
excellent. I think is an excellent incremental step since we are still in flux. It's a much better incremental step than I think any previous proposal, which is like a giant leap toward a specific, solution. So I'm very happy that we're going this small bit first. I think the thing I was hoping to hear back from is, did somebody volunteer yet to actually make this PR?
I think in the discussion, so basically, and I can't remember exactly where, but there has been some discussion where Claudio, who's done a bunch of work on the website, was like, if I'm remembering correctly, he was like, yeah, this looks interesting. We can put it into the list of things to do. And it may actually even be the PR that this landed in. Let me see if I can find that. Closed. So yeah, it's actually here's the PR that landed that particular update, and I could see some discussion um, where Claudio was involved. I thought that I saw sort of like maybe it was somewhere else. I think it must be somewhere else anywhere, but I think I got a sense that yeah, that was one of the things he might look at, you know, based on where we're at. And Jeffrey would know where that discussion happened because I think maybe he opened somewhere else or posted it in Slack or something like that. So I don't know if there are any other, like, I think from my perspective, the next step is like to have some, we had it on the agenda, but we had other invited guests. So we really kept discussion short in the last PSC meeting. So it was like an FYI, and then next week I'm hoping we can spend a little bit more time to get the sense of, yeah, do we have agreement that that viewpoint makes sense? And if so, what does that mean in terms of directions we take, that kind of stuff. But I kind of see this as like we were asked, or we asked some, in the end, it was like, hey, the package maintenance team is going to go and form an opinion. I think this is the first step in that opinion, right? And it says, hey, we should really follow this model. And here's a concrete step, like you said, towards moving in that direction.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm distracted. I am getting paged at work, so
Yep.
I'll
Okay.
that was why I was bouncing back and
Yeah.
forth there for a second. So awesome progress there. I think then the next step for us after, I mean, not after this, but we can start at it anytime, is the next phase of that PR I opened that was like this big long doc. And I think Jeffrey's very good recommendation was to try to break this into smaller chunks. So the website one is first. I think there was a bunch of things in there that I was like trying to just accumulate all the ideas that people were having in different forms. Like there was a bunch of discussions in Slacks and other issues and stuff. I have ideas for what the next steps could be for a few of them. Um, I could share that.
Yeah, yeah, I know that makes sense. So
or,
yeah, exactly. No, sounds like a
okay,
good thing.
cool. I just didn't know if that was a good use of the time.
Yep.
There, so one of the biggest feedback points that I think is completely valid is we were arguing that Cortex should not be enabled by default because it does not fully solve some of the problems. Yet we weren't like coming with any solution, right? Like nobody had code written to actually like solve the other parts. Um, so there's a few questions on whether or not it makes sense to try to write a new tool, whether whether we should be just looking at what some of these existing tools and just either up leveling one or setting some requirements around what it would take to be the like, quote unquote recommended path here. And I don't think we ever resolved that conversation. So like we discussed it at the collab summit a little bit, but we got pretty deep in the weeds on some of the more like, you know, I don't know, it's not all theoretical, but like some of the like more like, high level guiding principle parts. Um, so I'm wondering what do we think is the next step for that? Because like Antoine, I don't know if you're available or I haven't seen you talk yet, so I don't want to call you out. But like if you're distracted, but I would love to hear like if you have thoughts. Do we try to pursue turning Core Pack into a more holistic thing? Like we know that the shim thing would never work for Node Core, so like is that even worth it? Should we go to Jordan and look at what NVM and what changes NVM could make to be more suitable for the requirements of the Node project has? Like what do we want out of that part of the conversation? Like do we want to just start writing a new thing? Like that to me feels pretty risky. Like I would rather not because that was the mistake that I think Corpac made initially. Not today's conversation, but
Yep.
4 years ago was like it was too rushed into a solution and we didn't have a clear picture of the state. Does that question make sense? And
maybe, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. My initial 2 cents would be like maybe writing down what we think the ideal workflow would be.
so that's what I try to do in that PR. I don't know if
Right.
everybody's had a
Okay.
chance to review that. I wrote, I, I'd love feedback. I don't know if we have consensus on if this is the right thing, but I was trying to start. Let me get the link to that one. Sorry. I'm going to link to the specific section where I like sort of tried to lay out a.
Sure. Yeah, because like, or maybe like trying to land something that says like, if we've got agreement that this is we got basically it's a one liner that says this is the way things should be installed. We could then go to something which is like a multi-paragraph that expands on that and says like, here's the steps, like still trying to maybe not like imply the implementation, but like, here's what we think the best UX would be. Based on that, then we could say like, is there a tool that already does that? Great. If not, like, does a tool like Core Pack, could it evolve to do that? Or is it part of the solution? Or like, so okay, I'm gonna put that in the notes.
Yeah,
So
so
I
I opened this here, and I am not. I the doc was too long, so I understand that, and I understand why that probably limits this specific conversation. So we could break that section of the doc out into a new proposal that's smaller and tightly scoped to like the user experience we're trying to achieve. I think that would be a reasonable one reasonable next step. By the way, hey Jeffrey, you joined, so
Hey,
I'll
sorry, I'm joining midstream. You're talking about writing another document outlining like the goal or something?
well, we were discussing, your one that landed about let's update the website, I think was the perfect first step. But then we need to like figure out what the next step
You
is.
mean after
And
updating the website?
yeah, right. So like we have a user experience that Core Pack solves for a subset of the problem that we want. And one of the big feedbacks that people were giving, which is totally justifiable around, say, we were arguing don't enable it by default, was, yeah, but you're not giving us some other recommendation that solves this problem for us. It doesn't exist in the ecosystem. What about that? So we said, okay, well, we'll try to address that before we come back with a recommendation, right? That's I'm just saying, what are the next steps there? Because just updating the website doesn't solve that part, right? We need either dev engine to land, which I saw you asking for an update on that, or we need to write a new tool, or we need one of the existing version managers to step up to solve that user experience. Like there are 10 probably options that we could pursue that would help achieve the user experience that we're going for. So I was just like, the phrase the question is basically, what do we want to drive for next? Do we want to pursue one specifically? And so the idea that Michael and I were just talking about was like, maybe we should start with a user. I think Michael said like, what's the user experience that we're trying to achieve? Does the tool already exist that does that?
Well, this is
And so
basically
we
the
should
same
define that
question
first.
as like, what are the goals of Core Pack, where, that we never kind of got an answer to, where it's like, is the goal that, um, like I change into the folder that has of a project and then it automatically starts using the right package manager and right package manager version, or is it just that I get warned to use a different version, or you know what I mean? Like that's never quite been pinned down of what Core Pack aims to achieve. Um, that's kind of a starting point because like that's only relevant in the sense that like anyone asking anyone who's being persuaded to migrate from Core Pack to something else will want to know how it compares, and what they're used to from Core Pack will inform what they um, can get out of the other, out of the other alternative. Um, with regard to the website, I mean, so Claudio, I think, is going to probably own the whole, building the React components aspect of the PR for that. But like something that we could be working on now is like, well, what are the instructions that you would list for people. You know, we found two tools, ASDF and Mies, that supposedly manage both runtime and package manager. I haven't tried out either one of them. Someone needs to do that. Like if you install node and npm/yarn/pnpm through either of these, what's the flow like? How clunky is it? How does it compare to core pack or NVM plus core pack or, you know, other combinations?
Yeah, I messed with them. I think it's, to me, not all that important for the initial phase here, because what we're with the initial phase, what we're doing is just listing options. So I would say that we just we the end goal of this particular part of it is just have a bunch of instructions that are correct in that they get you to the right end state, but it doesn't really matter if they're a bit clunky because they're better than the previous, right? So like
Right.
what
I mean,
I would
that's kind of
say,
why I was thinking that like even before going further, we like finish this. Like get the new instructions for, and then it's like, okay, what are the pros and cons of each? Because there's going to be multiple instructions. Like, okay, here if you're on Mac, if you're on Linux, blah blah blah. If you want to use ASDF, if you want to use Mies, if you want to use NVM plus Core Pack, if you want to blah blah blah. And so this matrix of possibilities, what are the pros and cons of each one, and then you know, like to your point, like that we could write the criteria of like what would the ideal user experience be, and then which of these variations comes closest to it, you know.
and so to be clear, I was thinking those could happen in parallel, which is why
Yeah.
also you weren't on the call yet, so we didn't have an update that I didn't know that Claudio had fully volunteered to own the implementation on the website part.
Well, I mean, he didn't
So
say, I just asked on Slack, does someone want to lead this? And he stepped up. I didn't clarify like you're only going to lead the nuts and bolts and not the other, you know, but like I assume because he hasn't been involved in these other discussions that he would kind of defer to us on the like what should the content of
Yeah, I think
the
so.
code blocks be, but maybe he'll want to be part of that too. I don't know.
I think he can contribute, but my assumption is that like he'd be looking to be like, well, what does the project think we should be putting there, right?
yeah, and that's where I think this group would be definitely the right people. But what we should probably do is not just write it ourselves. Like ideally, we should reach out to the ASCF folks and these sort of whoever we're going to put on there, and have them do a review, and make sure we're following the combination of their best recommendation and ours, um, which we can definitely do. Like I know the NVM Windows version of what's it called, and whatever the NVM, the maintainer who does the Windows version of NVM was in one of the threads as well. So like we should also include them, uh, and get their
Not
feedback
Jason,
on it.
maybe?
Yeah, it was a couple weeks ago, so I can't remember, but
I mean, one decision that we could make to help narrow down the work tremendously is it a hard requirement, like in terms of our like intended desired UX? Is it a hard requirement that whatever tool we're recommending to users to do version management manages both runtime and package manager?
I don't think it is. So I didn't assume that from the wait. Sorry. Let me make sure I'm understanding. Uh, there's two things. There's the recommendations we're doing on the website and the end state. I don't think for the recommendations it is a requirement that they manage both. I think we should make recommendations on how to do it with the choice of tooling. So if you want to use NVM, which today only supports the NPM version that ships with that version of Node, then we should have instructions that say, once you are done with installing NVM, if you want the additional user experience that Corpac provides, here's a link to the Corpac docs. If you want the additional experience that NPM provides out of the box by doing npm install G, here's a link to npm docs.
Well, I wouldn't put them as like, and here, go figure out the docs. Like we could just have like the set of instructions, like what, the one-liner to install NVM, the one-liner to install Core Pack
Yeah.
enable,
Sure. Sorry,
whatever.
I didn't mean to. I should have been less prescriptive. I didn't mean to. I should have not even said here's a link to the docs. I just meant like here's how to do it. And if that is the one liner and then an additional link that says for more info on other details that here, like that's good. I sorry, I didn't mean to be prescriptive there, but I think that for today. But I do think for the end state, the like node ships something like the core pack plus, core pack plus plus or whatever, right? Like where it comes with the node binary. In that regard, I do think it is a requirement that the end state solution solve for both.
And I would make it more like we could define our ideal user experience to be you install X, wherever X comes from. And then having installed X, you do, I don't know, you ask X to install your node. Or maybe you just ask X to install, like we'd have to work. This is where we'll definitely need to spend time, but it could be like you install X, you ask X to install your project. It finds the node version in the package JSON, installs it. It finds your package manager in the package JSON, and installs it. Right? Like that's where I think we could in parallel, we could take a couple approaches. One is we could try and experiment with what we could do today and look at those and learn. Or in parallel, we could say, well, for getting implementations, what would be the best thing, right? Like, is it that we want it automatically to read a package JSON and install it from there? Or should you be able to ask it to install different things or some combination of that? Like, what is it that we think it would look like in terms of developer experience that would be ideal? Whether we could ever make that or not,
Well,
it would be
that's
nice
kind
to
of what I
have that.
was, that's kind of what I was getting at, is that like, I'd rather not have every conceivable option when some are going to be clearly superior to others. Like, I don't know, to your point, I don't know how important it is that there be a single tool that does this, especially if it's kind of transparent to the user. Like, if it hooks into the path such that you don't have to run any commands when you go into the packet, when you go into the project, it doesn't really matter if it's one tool or two, right? But like, there's like, I think a tool that reads configuration, like from dev engines or somewhere else, automatically is clearly better than a tool that you have to tell what version explicitly every time. Like, so we could like maybe set some minimum requirements of like, we're only going to recommend tools that support reading the correct runtime and version and package manager and version from some kind of configuration in the project, so things like that. And that could help, like I'm just saying, like that could help narrow down, like we should only recommend good options, I feel like,
Yeah, I think like it's the if we could write down here's our ideal endpoint at any one time, the website recommending the thing that we think is closest to that makes sense to me. Right? Like really it's like, hey, we want to get you this experience. Here is a way you can achieve that experience, right? And maybe if there's a couple, like you still get back into what if there's three equally good ones?
Well, we could list a few. We don't have to list only one. We could list a
Yeah.
few, but I mean, I think it's better to list 3 than 15. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
definitely. Yeah.
and then, and we could have very brief explanations for why you'd want one versus the other. Like, it could just be comments in the code snippet or something like that. Um, like, if you know you're never going to use yarn, this one's good for, you know what I mean? Or something to that
Yeah.
effect. Like, this one works better, but if you need to use yarn, go look at the other one. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if core pack or if yarn even works without core pack, right? Or at least the new yarn even works without core pack. So like, okay, well, that'll push you to be doing a solution that's something plus core pack, right? So it might be something along those lines where we're a little like, this is why you choose option A versus option B.
But
I
it
think
probably
that
should be
kind
a
of
smaller number.
educational Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it probably should be, like you said, a smaller number of them. I could even have seen like, here's one, and here's a link to a doc where then we can basically let people PR in whatever they want in terms of how to install using different tools, right? And
Well, and also like if we
My-
have some kind of document of like, this is the user experience we want, then that gives us a way to keep things contained between like every, how many people have written node version managers? Like there's at least 10, right? Like if we have something that like is like, well, this is the user experience we're trying to recommend that we want to recommend to people. If your tool comes closer to this than anything currently on our recommendations, then sure, give us a PR. But if you're not,
right,
then
yeah,
go away. You know what I mean?
this is what I was going to try to say is we need to have pretty clear guidelines on like what qualifies and what doesn't. And I'm not sure we fully have that yet. I think it's fine to get moving without it because we have a pretty small number of tools and we know it's a fairly known thing. But as we go forward, it will definitely help to have clarity there so that we don't get that. Because especially if we add what I would qualify as commentary on the website that says, like you literally the words you just used, I would not be surprised if somebody and says disagree there. You can use this if you use yarn with for blah 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 reasons or whatever, right? Like
yeah,
there's always somebody who's going to say that as soon as we put it on the website, especially, right? So if when we go to add that stuff, I think they're super valuable, and I think we should do that. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do that, but we just need to be careful and stick to the really clear things and have the right documents, like you said, to point to that say, here's what, here's how we got to this being the wording we use on the website. If you disagree, fine, go, open a PR and we'll like do the discussion around it. But it needs to meet these requirements, and the requirements would be something along the lines of getting us toward the user experiences we're trying to support. Um, And again, we don't yet have that language nailed down or merged somewhere. Like we have it, I think,
And
in a few different forms, but it's not a clear story yet.
the other thing is like, I would like to see, oh, well, okay, so maybe the step one, like, so, to your point, we could be writing down this intended user experience right now. I would rather not take the lead on that if one of you doesn't mind spearheading that. Um, but I would also love to see how close ASDF and MEIS, and if there are any other options I'm unaware of, can get to it, or maybe a combination of two tools can get to it. Because like maybe we don't have to build something, maybe we can use one of those or send a PR to one of the like, oh, send a PR to MEIS to add support for dev engines, and now we're done. You know what I mean? And it's a lot less work than building a brand new tool from scratch.
It is the ideal, in my opinion. Like that should be our goal: is that the node project does not take on more scope and own
yeah,
it. That said, as things change, the inevitable thing that will happen is that by making this recommendation, it will consolidate the ecosystem, which is a good thing. Again, I'm a fan of picking winners. I don't think it's a bad thing. It will consolidate the ecosystem, and if it consolidates the ecosystem around the project, then that project will become critical infrastructure for the project, for us, for all of us, right? Not just I don't mean like I mean for Node, right? And so we just need to be careful about the future there and make sure that we're a little bit like
Well,
if it was a foundation project, that would be ideal. Like it should, if we can help it, we should preference a foundation project over a non-foundation because we have the proper governance, the code of conduct, the all these like trappings of formality that matter a lot in the long run. It might not matter for the user experience, but they matter a lot for the way these projects are maintained and the longevity, and that they are not, at risk of an XV attack and like all these other things that come with it. Like we should, and if we find one that is very close to the solution that is not a foundation project, we should go to the leadership of the project and we should say, are you interested in becoming a member of the foundation? Here are the requirements. Here's the what you get and the blah blah blah. Or like make the pitch, but like it's a little bit more than just the user experience once we get to the point of picking a winner.
Yeah, but again, I'm expecting we'll pick at least a couple winners. And if we have criteria for the UX flow that we want, then all it takes for someone else to be a new winner is to be at least as good as the existing options. So that like then now we're at least giving you a roadmap. It's almost like it's like when someone started PMPM. It's like, okay, if PMPM wants to unseat Yarn, it needs to do at least everything that Yarn did. So it was like, or Bun being like has to do everything that Node does in order to unseat Node. Like, yeah, it's potentially a high bar, but it's not insurmountable. So
Yeah, totally agree with that. Sorry, I was trying to thumbs up, but this meeting doesn't have the emojis for some reason.
But I
I
think
totally agree with that.
it is a good point that you make, Wes, that like if we like say, hey, here's our perfect user experience, here's the way to do it, everybody does that. You do have a dependency on the same reason why we're like, well, we're never, we said we're not going to remove NPM because there's so much documentation that says use NPM to use this. And if that thing then becomes a problem, that is an issue. And in part, we've helped make it such that when it becomes a problem, it's an issue. Not saying that they ever would become an issue, but it's worth thinking about, right? For sure.
Yeah, totally. And that's my saying it. This is risk mitigation. This is not because I'm thinking I just trust any individual people or any individual projects. It's just that there's a reason these structures exist, and we should leverage them when we are making longer term decisions like this. I wish the stuff existed when NPM, like if these things existed back when some of these other decisions were made, it would have helped us a lot today. So I just been trying to give a better, end state than where we started. And in this case, I think having preference toward more robust governance would actually be a good thing. And robust governance doesn't necessarily mean 30 contributors and some weird arbitrary set of human requirements, but it does mean a code of conduct probably, and it does mean some security documentation, and it probably means like these like pretty
Yeah.
standard stuff. Nothing too unique, but just like and the foundation just has the leg up on the fact that the Node project is a member, and we've proven that the foundation has a really good, healthy understanding of how to make the right long-term decisions, right? Like I'm talking sunsetting projects or helping maintainers find new people or like all these other things that are, what happens when someone's 5 to 25 years old, right? Like somewhere in the 5 to 25-year-old range, software starts to need these type of, medical treatments.
So
and so, yeah.
just getting back to like my question about like, are we trying to limit it to one tool? So I think it's fine to say like the two tools would be acceptable. I guess the question there is like, how well do they work together? But the other thing is like, is it a hard requirement that users version manage both runtime and package manager? Like right now, the user experience we're providing is version manager, package manager, but presumably don't version manage Node, or we just leave that to you to figure out, which I feel like no one would argue that that's what we really want to encourage people to do.
In fact, it doesn't even work correctly. Like that's, I think, the biggest problem that people hit is that it doesn't. You cannot do that actually, right? Today, like there are bugs that users hit because we do not provide some level of tooling that does both.
So if we at least agree on that, then it's like, then I think like we know we're not going to stick with our status quo of only recommending core pack, but either not shipping or not recommending a version manager. So I don't know if we want to change anything about the status quo before we have whatever new recommendations are settled. I'm assuming probably not. But I guess then the question is like, okay, so what is like, okay, so assuming we can, I mean, someone object if you don't think we should rule out version manage package manager, but don't version manage runtime.
So
But
I
like,
just don't think, the only, it's not an
but then I
objection.
was going to ask is like, okay, but what about the reverse? Like, is it an acceptable recommendation to version manage runtime and not version manage package manager?
So actually, I think that the thing here, I think we should recommend that both be version managed. But the way we get there doesn't necessarily have to be one tool that does both. I think it would be perfectly acceptable for us to make a recommendation that says these two tools, one manages node versions and one manages package manager versions, and here's how they work together. So the doc should be holistic. It can't be, 12
Yeah,
million
but I
different
don't want it to
directions.
be so loosey-goosey, like, like here's a series of commands, like a 10-line bash script or something. And the first commands are like, here's how to install the version manager and how to install node with the version manager. And then a comment that's like, and if you want to version manage your package manager, continue and then install
Right.
core
So
pack
like
enable. But it's
the way
like,
I
well,
would
am I
see it would
supposed to do it
be
or not? How should I know? Like, we should just be a little more opinionated and like
right. So
recommend.
this is what I meant by that though, is I'm saying the doc that we make, which will end up being the website page at some point for this, right? Should say, we recommend, strongly recommend, I don't know, like phrase it so that we're like very clear that we're recommending this to manage both your node version and your package manager version in some way. Here is a way to do that with NVM and Core Pack. Here is a way to do that with just ASDF. I don't know, again, we have to like get into the nitty gritty, but like,
Yep.
here is a way to do it with X. But none of the doc should say, if you want to manage your package manager version, we should say, you should, end of sentence. And here is how to do it with these combinations, with these. And so like for ASDF, maybe it does both, great. For NVM today, we don't say if you want to, we say if you use just NVM, you get the version of npm that comes with Node. End of story. And that's fine. That is version managing. It's just in a different way. Maybe not working for everybody, but that is in a
Yeah,
different
that could be
way.
like, we could phrase it a little less like, rather than using words like if you want, we could be more like, if you know that all of your projects only use npm as their package manager, do this or stop here or whatever. Because then it's like a little bit more like, okay, well, I can answer that question. Like, I don't have to go do research to like understand what the better choice is or something like that. It's about my code, whatever.
I
It's an
think
objective
also,
question.
Exactly.
I think also like what we're talking about is, and I think most of this has been about like new people or people who are not as maybe sophisticated. So like, I don't even think it needs to be like we recommend, like it could just be, here's how you install it. And that installation basically says we're going to install it such that you're versioning Node and you're versioning the package manager, right? People who are, experienced in managing production deployments, they'll be like, well, I don't even need a package manager because I don't want to run that in production. Like, we don't need to tell them and like, okay, and here's how you like don't install the package manager step, right? Like, I think that this has mostly been about new people who come, getting them going in the right direction by default, right? And so like, with that view might simplify our life a little bit from, if we keep that as let's not tell everybody in the world and all the different options. Let's tell the people who are these new people that we want to have them do the right thing by default, right?
Yeah, and this is specifically why I think it's also important we are differentiating here, and I tried to do this in my big doc proposal. The complexity we're adding by these recommendations is for local development, not production. Nobody should run Core Pack on their production deployment. End of story. Done. Stop here.
Yeah.
That is not the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
Right. And we should be very clear about that. And it's the same thing around like, I said this in one of the PRs, the Node Run PR. That's like people are using Node or npm start in their prod. I understand they're doing that. This is wrong. We should never have let this happen and get to that state. We should have made a very
But
strong
it's so
recommendation.
widely published that, yeah.
Right. And so we, as the project, the folks who know, the folks who've been around the block on all of these problems, we can and should take a much stronger stance on these types of things. And so if the docs and Node say, here is your production deployment run book. And it in nowhere does it mention in the production deployment run book running Corpac or npm start
Yeah.
or X number of other things. And it says, here's how you should do it. You should run the node binary directly, and you should set all of these flags, because all of these flags are critical to have tuned for whatever your production environment is. There is no situation where you shouldn't be setting these for to some value. Now, here's the caveats and the different trade-offs, and if your machine is, XYZ, whatever, like all these things that you need to consider. But like, we should have that as a production thing, and that should be very different instructions from what you have for the, like, I'm a dev and I'm cloning a library to make a pass, right? That's where Corpac sits.
The other thing that we should probably add is some kind of page that describes how to set up a project for version management. Like, you should create a dev engines block, and this is what it should contain, or something to that effect. Like,
we have some of that in the package maintenance repo already, by the way. We like way early on started saying, like, let's make better docs for module authors and stuff. So
well, but I'm thinking like it should go right on the Node website. Like,
totally agree, but we
similar to
we already have starters.
Okay, great. But like, maybe that could be like the last thing, like after the installation, a link to the other page that's like, and here's how to set up your project to work with version management or something like that.
I just meant we should move it into the website.
Yeah.
I actually think the fact that it lives in a package maintenance repo is a bad problem.
It was the first,
but
it was the first step, but we never.
I was going to say
the final step.
I was going to say something else too. Is like, I don't know if we want to recommend this, but like another possible way to recommend people setting things up is to like add both Node and their package manager to dev dependencies, and then the instructions could be like install Node. However, may not even need a version manager to install it, and then always run it as npx node command, npx
this is what my
npm command, or whatever.
This is my proof of concept. Literally what it does is exactly what you described. I'm not saying we should productionize that or write a new tool and ship this new tool, but like, it is possible today, and I think that would be a really interesting recommendation for us to make on the website even, because it is functional and actually pretty darn good from a user experience perspective. The only caveat right now is people are concerned about the ownership of the Node package on NPM. I'm not concerned personally. I think it's great, and I think the folks who are doing it are
that's
well
resolvable. Like, we know those
resolvable.
people, they're friendly. We can figure that out. That we can, before we recommend it to anyone, if we want to go that direction, before we recommend that to anyone, we can, transfer it to the foundation or something.
Yeah, if we have between the couple of things, and Node Run actually helps us here, which is, it's weird, but you could do Node Run Node if you install it
as a dev dependency.
I
was just thinking that, like, could this be an extension of Node Run?
It would use the system node to run the Node version for your app. Does that make sense? It's not. I don't think it's ideal, but it's functional today with Node Run today. You could npm install Node at a version, and actually at a version range, and then you can have a lock file that does all the nice locking behavior without extra stuff in your package JSON or SSRI or any of that dev engine stuff. That all the extra dev engine stuff, not the initial part. But if you install it as a dev dependency, you get from npm that extra level of nice, stuff, and you can then just run npm run node or npx node. Or once Node Run is more popular, we can do Node Run Node, which, user experience wise is kind of weird. But
yeah, we can make it. We can maybe add another binary to our repo, NodeX or something, to be more similar to npmx or to npx. But anyway, yeah, I was just thinking like that. Maybe that's like a phase 2, but that could be a direction that we go in.
So the next step, though, that was
we're down to 8 minutes, and it was a good discussion. But so it'd be back to the original question, like next steps, next concrete steps. does it make sense to try and write down our ideal user experience? Or does it, or like, because we could do that in parallel with the like getting the stuff onto the website, or do we learn from the website and then do that? Like, I think that's our kind of our choices, right? Parallel or sequential on those two.
I guess it could be parallel because then it could inform what the instructions are. Like, oh, this set of instructions, it checks these 5 boxes but misses these 3 from the ideal user experience, whatever.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I think that helps also give people the ability to work on the parts they can or want to without having to be gated on something else. So, like, I would love it. Just to be very transparent here, I have, after the like going to the collab summit and like spending probably more time on the stuff that I should have been sort of trying to catch up before a 3-week vacation I'm coming up on. So I have been able to not move any of this forward like the past maybe month. If we could carve off something that other folks can move forward here, that would be, I think, really ideal. So I felt I took some lead here and then haven't been able to commit the time. So I feel a little bit bad. But I think if we could say, hey, anybody who wants to take the next step of writing down the ideal or taking what's in my doc, because I think it's kind of all right as a starting point, and putting it into a separate doc, which is like what Jeffrey you did for the for somebody else did maybe. There's been a lot of moving pieces, but just like carve off a small chunk and like keep that ball rolling. I think would be really really helpful.
Yeah, it could become another doc like I did for the goals. Like it's essentially like those goals were like our project goals, but like yeah, it could be like just it's one goal. This is our intended UX, and then like list out in bullets what the goals are. I would also love to get input on that from Antoine, just like because you're so enmeshed in Core Pack and familiar with everything that it can do and like what people use it for, that like um I mean, Core Pack will be one of the options. I think Core Pack will probably be one of our most recommended options because it checks a lot of boxes. Like it's something that we control. It's works cross-platform. It's on NPM registry. Like, you know, it's probably. I mean, I've never even used Mies. So, like I'm not saying that I want to use something other than Core Pack. So, I think Core Pack is likely to be uh, a common option in like what we recommend in these solutions, but it's not going to be the only one because like I think we want to have at least 1 or 2 options that are like here's one tool that can do everything rather than a mixture of 2 tools. So then it's like for the versions that don't have Core Pack, like if we're recommending ASDF or Mies or something else, then like you can't just say like and does everything the Core Pack does. Like it's got to be like okay, so what specifically does this need to do to be equivalent or to come close to the equivalence of, NVM plus Core Pack or whatever the like version is that includes Core Pack. Does that make sense? So anyway,
Yeah,
I get my question.
sure. I would
So I
I
guess
would
my
point
question for
out.
you is, would you mind helping like write those criteria of what, what would be like the, I guess, important functionality to be equivalent to Core Pack? Like not everything that Core Pack does presumably needs to be mimicked, um, but some of it does.
Yeah, sure. Actually, the survey also results to the test. Based on that, we asked 2 related questions.
Yeah, I think we asked them what version management they're using and both for Node and package manager, or if they manage one or both, something along those lines. But I mean, I think we're in agreement that we want to recommend they version manage at least runtime, presumably both runtime and package manager. So I'm not sure what the survey covered beyond that base level.
Yeah, I guess the thing is maybe what Fortnite does is not that relevant if the community
I'm
actually
having hard
prefers
trouble
something.
hearing you. Do you want to speak closer to the mic, maybe?
Sorry. Yeah, I said if maybe what Spellpack does is not that relevant if the community prefers something else.
Well, what I was just thinking was like I don't want to have a bullet point in the desired UX that's something like creates the package manager field automatically if missing, or something that's extremely specific to Core Pack's implementation, where it's like, you know, maybe we do want, creates
Yeah.
configuration if missing, or something like, written in a more generic way. So it would create the dev engines field or the .nvm RC file or whatever, like, but maybe we don't. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, anything that's arguably like not required functionality, I would leave out for now as like a nice to have, and just like what's the bare minimum, set of features that we want to, ensure that what we're recommending can do. You know what I mean? Sure. I mean, we could also all do it together. Whatever.
But if you two got together and wrote out like, you spent an hour, here's our ideal developer experience, that would be a great starting point to get everybody to think about and comment, right? Because it's always easier to look at something and say, but what about the default configuration or whatever, right?
Yeah, I almost wonder if I'm not the best at person, because like I feel like my experience is so simple. Like I just use npm for everything. And I just use the global, I use the version that comes with Node. So it's sort of like I almost wonder if someone who's has more elaborate needs than me, like someone who's worked on monorepos and with PNPM or something like that, is like a better person to help you, to pair with you than me, because like,
I mean,
the reason I've never been involved in this stuff until recently is because like it's all like my needs have always been met. I've never felt the need to reach for an alternate package manager or reach for core pack, you know.
I'm happy to help here. I just don't have, I'm being conscientious of my time commitments, and that's why I've been unable to do some of this work right now. Because I do have experience with this from a few different aspects that I think are rather unique, because Netflix doesn't mandate a single package manager, and I'm on the central team that supports all of these package managers. And between that and the open source side, like I have seen a bunch of these problems manifest in real applications. So I am happy to help review. The problem is I just can't volunteer to pair right now because I'm time constrained. And so if this work waits until late July, then I'll volunteer. But otherwise, I'm just
Well,
here to like
or it could
review the
be,
PRs.
or we could do it async. Like, someone could just start a Google Doc and share it, and we can like just each work on the doc when we have time, and then, talk on Slack and see, like, once we think we get it to the shape, to a point where we think it's in like more or less complete shape, then we can open a PR with it. Do you want to do that, Anton? And then that can involve all of us too, or whoever's interested.
I'm gonna have to drop off because we're at time. Can I make somebody else the owner so you can keep going?
I also
I
got to
should get
drop.
going
So
too, but
Okay. But that sounds like we'll have to figure out somebody opening a doc and then collaborating async sounds like a good way to get started. So, okay. Talk to everybody later. Thanks for your
all
time.
right. Maybe Michael, do you mind volunteering to create the doc and just invite us, and then we can all.
I guess I can create a doc and
I'm
maybe nothing in it.
nominating you.